All right, everyone. Thank you for coming to the role of artists and administrators in a digital world. So we have two presenters today. We'll talk about communities of digital practice associated with museums. First, how digital technology transforms the social framework around the arts. And then second up, Chad Weinard will talk about the areas where, an area where technology and art intersect. So first up, Jackie Levy of the Arts Tech Meetup. And after that, so Arts Tech explores how new technology and social media help to raise awareness about the arts and enrich the audience experience. After Jackie, Chad Weinard, who is manager of new media at North Carolina Museum of Art, where he leads digital engagement initiatives via web, mobile, in-gallery technology, and social media. And he has a background in fine arts, design, and web development. So, but without a bio from Jackie, I can't exactly introduce him. I will have to let him introduce himself. Let us go then to your presentation. Okay. Thanks.
So,
move over?
yeah, sure, I'll do that. Okay. Can everybody hear me okay? Is this on? Yeah. So I'm Jackie. I recently moved West Coast to San Francisco. I'm pretty stoked to be here for the conference. One of my roles at Arts Tech, I've been helping to run this group since 2008. We are just a very casual group. We try to meet monthly, and it's really we have a lot of different formats. We do panel discussions, presentations, demos. We had a conference before, and really our role is to connect a whole group of diverse group of people, whether that's arts administrators, artists, hackers, entrepreneurs, folks in the tech world. Our goal is to work across organizations and across disciplines to connect people. We recently started expanding into new cities. We've been doing has been pretty popular, just our format. And we recently started a chapter in San Francisco, which I run with another set of volunteers. We have a group in Philadelphia and New Jersey, and our main chapter, initial group started in New York City. Just a quick show of hands, has anybody here watched an Arts Tech meetup online or been to one or participated in New York? Yeah. All right. Yeah, I was watching the whole Hurricane Sandy from San Francisco, which was pretty crazy. But anyway, so that's
not as crazy.
Not as yeah. So these are some of the things. This is pulled from the site. Really, we want to raise awareness about arts, particularly around new technologies, and we want to have collaboration. Facilitate collaboration between organizations and individuals, and then also using technology and a whole range of disciplines to listen to audiences, not only for organizations to listen to audiences, but also artists and help audiences talk to each other. So that's a little bit about that. So one of the reasons why I'm here and why Arts Tech is here and why we're here as a group is really learning from each other, collaborating with each other, innovating. These are like in principle what we're after as a meetup group, and this is some of the things that we hope to facilitate. So, I think as arts organizations, one of the things that arts organizations do and artists and the role of arts is really to help build communities, and we do this through the arts. And I think as arts organizations. One of the things that that arts organizations do is to connect individuals and to inspire, educate, among many other things. But as I guess an administrator or as someone who's running a network and putting together events and panels and these kinds of things, I think, we share a lot of things that, museums do as well in terms of public programming. We work to connect individuals, inspire, educate by showing emerging technologies, showing how artists are using technology in new ways. But I think the difference between an arts organization that is, presenting work or something like that, I think one of the differences that we have is that we work across organizations, so we don't necessarily have we're not stuck inside of a building. We can go and do lots of public programming.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Just keep talking.
Okay. One of the things that I think a lot of networks have as an advantage is that we can work across disciplines. We can have very flexible structures, and we can really evolve as we go. So we're not necessarily tied to a single space. The thing that's really nice, having been working and running Arts Tech for a while, is that it's very emergent. And the nice thing that I've seen is that we didn't come up with this idea to expand into new cities and help facilitate these conversations. Lots of people have just stepped up and say, hey, I want to run these kinds of conversations and do this format in San Francisco. I want to do one in Philadelphia. So my role has been helping to make that happen. So I think one of the things that our Arts Tech is not necessarily new in terms of format, and what I wanted to focus, take a chunk of time to look at is what's come before and what's similar to what we're doing, and take a look at these networks and think about how these networks are working in partnership with arts organizations, institutions, and artists, and complementing the work, but also filling a gap that arts organizations don't do. So I'm going to focus on specifically, so I'll focus on Upgrade first. So Upgrade is very similar to Arts Tech. They started in New York City in '99. It was just a handful of people met up at a bar, and they're like, we want to do this, and all artists, and really wanting to connect what people were doing in digital media, then called net art or whatever it's called now. As their mission, it's an international emerging network of autonomous nodes united by art, technology, and a commitment to bridging cultural divides. So this developed. This is not something I'll conjecture that the founders had set out to do initially. I can't speak for them, but they are all international artists. They're all working on the web, so it kind of evolved. And what ended up happening was really interesting. Upgrade has expanded into all these different cities. So Upgrade is presenting artists, and it's artists showing their work and sharing their work with each other, and just having conversations about new emerging technology and how they're using it in their artwork. Some of these cities, maybe they do 1 or 2 events a year. Some of these are not even in existence anymore. When I moved to San Francisco, I was able to connect with a lot of artists and institutions through the Upgrade that is being run in San Francisco. It's run by an artist called Scott Kildall. He's done a lot of really interesting work. He did a project called Tweets in Space that he did crowdfunding for. And he's gathering artists and having conversations about new ways that augmented reality is being used in artwork. So, Upgrade is really interesting. And the advantage of having all these different upgrades running across different cities is that there was an international conference of all the upgrades, all these artists and people working across disciplines that's able to come together. So I found really interesting about Upgrade. And this is one of the things that I thought was really nice. It's decentralized, it's non-hierarchical, it's very local, so an upgrade in Istanbul will look very different from San Francisco or New York. It's run by, folks in the cities, and, it looks at cutting-edge technology. So that's a little bit about Upgrade. I wanted to look also and just mention how many people are familiar with these organizations, Turbulence or Rhizome or Dance Tech. So Turbulence I think is really interesting. They've been around for a while and commission work, present work online. They have a pretty nice archive of net art and really interesting work. And what I find interesting about these three entities is, they really live online, but there's definitely an existing community. So Rhizome and Dance Tech. Rhizome started out as a listserv, and so did Dance Tech. And these sites, essentially, rhizome.org and dancetech.net emerged out of an existing group of people that were already creating work, that were already collaborating with each other, that wanted to share resources with each other. And Rhizome's gone on to present work, to commission work, and now that they're actually based and located in the new museum. So it's something that's really evolved over time as a network, and that's really their function. And Dance Tech is also very similar. It's really an existing community of arts practitioners, people working in digital media, and what started out as a listserv now, the person who runs the network, his name is Marlon. He's with Dance Tech is producing work online, streaming work, having online video festivals, is doing a lot of really interesting work online, but is also bringing people together through residencies and partnering with many, many different organizations. So I find all these organizations very, very unique in character, but they really live online, but have also like a very physical presence. So I find those very interesting. And a few other networks that I wanted to, just mention. These I see. The Burning Man project, I see as definitely a network, and 01 also. I characterize it as a network, but really, Burning Man. I don't know is anybody here not familiar with Burning Man as a festival? So Burning Man is an amazing festival. I go every year, and they have the Burning Man project, and they run specific programs to bring together artists that are participating at the Burning Man Festival, that are creating work at Burning Man, that are showing work at Burning Man. But the Burning Man project really has specific programs throughout the year and throughout the country and really throughout the world that is working to make sure that there's a community of practice in specific cities, and it's supported by the BurningMan .org the organization. And I find 01 also really interesting. 01 was started by someone named Andy Cunningham. They've produced I think 2006, 2008, 2010, 2012. So they had 4 biennials. And it's one of the largest biennials that is focused on digital media. It's at the intersection of art and technology, presenting really incredible work. They just had a really interesting show over at, in San Francisco. So they're doing really interesting work, as a festival, supporting this network of digital artists and organizations focused on emerging technology. How much time do I have here? Am I good on time? I have 11 minutes here, but
you're totally good.
Okay,
got plenty of time.
All right. So what I find really interesting about both of these organizations and these networks is they really are supported by a festival model, and out of the festival model there's all these emergent networks, and so these organizations support those networks through their organizations, but it's kind of, I see them like a network of networks in a way. So that's a little bit about those organizations. I'm going to take just a little bit more time to talk about Arts Tech. So as Arts Tech, similar to a lot of these organizations, we present programming in multiple formats. We've had panel discussions around Creative Commons, around crowdfunding, around artists using social media, around Occupy Wall Street. We had a panel. We've had interesting ways that people are using social networks for fundraising, Facebook for fundraising, and so we've had a lot of different formats. We produced a conference and curated that, and it's essentially a meetup group. You go to meetup.com /arts-culture technology. I'll have the URL for you guys. You can find it out. But essentially, we're a meetup group. We've had events in meetup.com headquarters in New York City. That's I think that's Scott Hefferman, right? That's how you pronounce it. At one of our meetups in 2008, I believe. Yeah, that was November. No, that's not November. That's. This was in 2000. This was in 2009 that we had this event. Today's November 8th. So this is Scott at one of our meetups, and that's Julia over there on the right-hand side, and she's a founder of the New York chapter. So it's a nice group of people. We are definitely driven by our members. These are some folks at our holiday party. A lot of our panels and discussions and people that have presented have come from people that are part of our network, and that's the way we like it. People that are presenting and showing work, we want to make sure that they're involved and engaging, and in addition to just sharing knowledge, we get together and drink and and form friendships. So that's pretty nice. One of the things we've partnered with institutions to put together programs. This is an event that we did at the Whitney where Nina Simon was talking about her work, and that's one of the things that we find really rewarding is when there's an institution that wants to put together public programming. We have an audience to draw from, we have a network to draw from, and can partner to put something together that an institution might not ordinarily do. That's not related necessarily to an exhibit, but just general public programming. We are run by volunteers. Some of our volunteers, there's Topher, and John, and Biana, and some other folks here, for the guys that know them. And similar to Upgrade, this past year, we've taken up residency at Ibeam. So we've been having our events based at Ibeam, which is an art and technology center in New York City, and there's a very, very strong overlap in terms of what Ibeam is focused on and what they do in terms of public programming. They've hosted a lot of parties, and they helped support Upgrade, and now they're supporting us and hosting us. And for those, I just wanted to mention, for those of you who are in New York or might not be in New York, if you follow Ibeam NYC, they did lose a lot of things and a lot of equipment during Hurricane Sandy, and they're looking for a lot of support. So if you're looking to help out and support, you can contact me, just talk to me afterwards, or follow them. There's a lot of ways to support Ibeam. There was a pretty significant impact there. So I just wanted to mention that. So one of the questions that I really wanted to for us to consider as a group today, and think about and have a conversation around, is how do the networks that I mentioned support the work that we're all doing, and how do we support these networks? One thing that I was thinking about in terms of putting together this presentation, I'm interested in having Arts Tech grow in a very organic way. But where it doesn't need to live, I'm not going to go through and say, oh, I really want to have, Arts Tech be worldwide and, have an Arts Tech empire. It's really something that's been organic and that has come out of cities that have existing communities. And at the same time, partnering with arts organizations has been really rewarding on both sides. This past month, we had an event in San Francisco at GAFTA. It's a Gray Area Foundation for the Arts, and they do similar things that Ibeam does. In San Francisco, we did an event around crowdfunding, and it's not necessarily an event that GAFTA would have initially done, but they hosted it and they reached out to their audience and their listserv and promoted the event, and we brought an audience that may not have come to GAFTA. So it's been a really nice partnership with GAFTA, and then likewise with Ibeam, it's been just a very just a lot of confluence around that. So these are questions that I'm considering, and I think is really enriching. I think, and then finally, these are. The places where you can find us. We have a Tumblr site. We launched this year. We have a Twitter account. What is this here? Arts Tech Meetup is our Twitter handle, and a hashtag. The Arts Tech hashtag actually came out of people just tweeting. It's not something that really we said Arts Tech. It's something that our members were coming to our meetups, and it was just kind of emerged out of that. And so these are some of our URLs. And that's my piece.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Now, I think Chad will go ahead and start, and we'll take questions afterwards. If that, suits you. Does anyone have a quick question for Jackie while we switch over? Yeah.
I was fortunate enough to work with the Upgrade a lot when they were presenting Ibeam. And in a lot of ways, I see Arts Tech has kind of filled the absence they left because they're not meeting anymore in New York City, which is sad.
Sort of true, sort of not true.
Oh, we actually?
Yeah. There's been 3 meetings this summer, quite small.
Okay. I haven't had a loop in that, I guess, but.
I've been texting you, Al, by the way, that you
Oh,
Hi.
awesome. Yes.
Sorry, false information. Upgrade is still happening. But I mean, one of the things that they would say to would-be expansion cities or whatever is just organize a meetup or whatever, get people into a room together and do the event. And then do the second event. After that, hopefully on the website. Whatever. So there's not really like any big institutional bureaucracy involved. It's just do it. And then we'll click on the site. It seems like a good exchange, basically.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things I personally struggle with, like as in terms of running a network, and I know that's something that I think other people that are Yael, who's running Upgrade, I think is something that she's been considering also, is like, how do we support these networks and support each other as as people that are running these networks and running these events. Do we want to?
I think if you're ready to go, then
let me.
let's get started, and we'll have time for questions and discussion after.
Real quick, how do I get this in presenter?
I would hit escape, try view. Wait, yeah, there it is. I don't see it. Right. I think I don't know this version of Keynote. You need your notes.
Yeah.
We could do it the same way that Jackie did it with we could load it onto here as well, so you have your notes on another screen. Or maybe somebody in there in
Yeah,
the audience knows.
Customized presenter display
Oh, okay.
at the bottom. I'm just guessing. But
Are you?
That looks right.
Are you mirroring displays or not? 'Cause that's
That's
Yeah.
the trouble.
They should turn it off and.
Yeah, turn off mirroring. So, okay, so I think that is, okay, you have to go to your control panels.
Sorry, everyone.
Yeah, so then we probably should take another question, so not everyone is focused on this.
So there are tons of different groups that have a lot of overlapping.
Mm-hmm.
You know, some of them are on Meetup.com, some of them are just through mailing lists, some
Mhm.
mailing lists you can't even get to anymore, but they're still active. And
Mhm.
You don't know about it, and there's like a lot of word of mouth, and that's just kind of the nature of having these anarchic organizations.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because until you're in that group that knows where things are going on, it's like you hear about all these great things, that all these artifacts that happen after the fact, and you're like, oh, I wish I knew about that. Once you do know someone, like, it's very easy to jump from group to group, even if the members don't know, like even if the groups don't know. So are there any organizations or like kind of pop-ups that you've seen that help aggregate what's going
Yeah.
on? Like when, I don't know. There's been a ton of times where I've told people about the meetup from one group to another. Should have been to every one of these. Yeah, I'm telling you now, but you know, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of cross communication. Like there's Arts Tech, and Kyle McDonald just started Arts Sec, which is security meetup, and like there's no, unless you're in both, you don't know about each other.
I think, I mean, one of the things that I saw actually happen in New York, you know, there was like a very similar meetup for people that are just working, like just for museum professionals, right?
We've been sort of fallow and we're
But what I found interesting about that was that, you know, I mean, Arts Tech is working across a lot of different, you know, individuals from across different disciplines, and I think, you know, what you set up is really important because, you know, people that are arts administrators or people that are just working in marketing, you know, there's a need to talk with each other and share and you know do what MCN is doing.
not necessarily creative technologists.
Right.
The technologists that work in cultural
Mhm.
institutions. So there's definitely like overlap.
Yeah, and there are people from that group that come to Arts Tech or you know that will go to like Dorkbot. So and I think they're different characters. I think what could happen with something like Upgrade or with something like Arts Tech is, you know, it could very easily become something like Rhizome, where it becomes more organizational, more institutional, more you know, lasting. So I think it's really up to the people that are running the organizations in terms of how that happens. Do I see a need for aggregating those groups? I think there are some. I think that would be great to see. I'm not sure if Arts Tech is going to do that, but you know, I see that as something that would be great to happen.
Cool. Well, I think we'll try to switch over now.
Okay.
But thank you.
We'll go on the fly without the
Thanks
presenter
for-
note.
Your
Oh,
presenter
no.
is on.
Oh.
Sweet.
All right.
Price is a shot.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, we do want to know your name.
Mm-hmm.
And your existential.
Is that what
Let's
I
try it. Shoot. It looks wrong. Yeah. Don't know how to get you out of this one.
Let me try this here.
You see it hanging off the edge of the screen there.
Right.
Let me see if I can.
Yeah, do you think you have a solution?
Where's the IT department? Here.
Yeah. You get, if you get enough tech people in the room, these things become much, much harder.
As I'll explain, I started as an art historian, so that's my excuse.
I'm just wondering, just a show of hands, how many people here are like
Say again?
I wanted to know if we were all preaching to the choir.
But even if
Right.
you are, that proves the point, too.
Oh, yeah.
That there's a real correlation between what happens in the digital space and what happens in the
I don't know.
That's
Oh, I
right.
did. I don't know how to get this screen and that screen.
Have you quit the application
What's that?
and restarted it?
You don't have a preference about which display to choose.
So that's
Yeah,
the-
I was trying to find that.
Yeah.
That's on the screen right now.
Well,
Okay,
that's
Bravo.
display.
Or maybe a slideshow. Scale, so.
Uninstall AOL.
I'll present on secondary. There it is. There it is. That's it. So, yeah, if we hit play slideshow.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Jackie is my new hero.
Fantastic. My name is Chad Weinard. I'm the manager of new media at the North Carolina Museum of Art. What follows is part picture show, and excuse my voice, part personal narrative, and part professional existential crisis. Oops. That's the existential crisis, as you've seen. And we've already had one, so we're all set. I started my career, as I said earlier, in fine arts, as these kids did as well. It's good to see them. These are my kids. They say hello. From the fine arts, I moved on to art history. I did a stint at the Institute of Fine Arts in New York City, where I studied modern and contemporary art. As a student, I was kind of an odd student. I learned by doing things. So as I was taking a class in Paris of 1914, for instance, I would paint very bad Cubist paintings. It just so happens that this semester I was taking a class in Marcel Duchamp and Dada in France. I was also taking classes at the ITP, which is the telecommunications program at NYU. And I'm forgetting what the I stands for.
Interactive?
Yes, yes. And telecommunications always strikes me as funny these days. But when I was there, we didn't get to do such cool projections on the screen. It was mostly playing with, as you'll see, Future Splash Animator. This was done in 1996. This is the first interactive project I ever did. As I was saying, I did it concurrently with a class in Dada. It was a project called Duchamp's Window. Duchamp was a trickster. I think he's common enough to where we know him pretty well. He was an artist of great permission giving. So generations after him took from him the idea that art was not just an object, but it was a concept. It was an idea. It was a way of moving forward without being bound to paint and objectness. This is Fountain of 1914, and you'll see as we go, I'm kind of launching my own meta-narrative through the slides. It's the artist concept, and some of these will tie into perhaps the projects you're working on, even today, in technology departments, especially in museums. This is a work by Marcel Duchamp called Fresh Widow of 1920. It gives you a sense of his work, the wordplay especially. It is indeed a French window. It was a bit smaller in size than a real one. It does not open, rendered kind of useless in that sense, and black patent leather was put over the glass. I use this as the main interface for, again, my very first interactive piece. So please don't laugh. Each panel provided kind of a grid interface for me. I would roll over each one to show a different content piece about Marcel's life and work, music, art of the times, that sort of thing. I also tried to get in this piece a bit of the spirit of Dada as well. So as you would roll over some of them, there would be some random elements. It was quite maddening at times, I found, for visitors, and provided an element of chance and play as well. And the reason I bring this up, even though it's a bit painful for me, is because it gets at some of the problems I want to talk about today, which is one of which is even in the idea of using a work of art as an interface, we're changing the meaning and changing the context of it slightly. As we incorporate the artist's own style of engagement into the interface and interaction, we're talking about another usurpation, perhaps, of the artist dialogue. So not only am I just putting something into context, or trying to, at what point am I creating a new piece of art that is in the style of a Marcel Duchamp? And that's something I want to get at a little bit. Marcel famously put together this little piece, which was a mobile collection of his work to date. He made miniatures of his works, many of which were paintings at that point, but also objects and mixed media pieces. Put them in a very ingenious box, kind of nestled together, and put them all within a very portable and very stylish satchel bag. The reason I find this interesting is a lot of different reasons. As I think about this, I think about our own online collection and the things we want to do as we move to a mobile platform. We think about making things portable, making things miniature. What happens when you make a personal collection of something, especially if it's your own things, making things shareable, collectible, tradable even. Marcel had a lot of fun with these. He would mix them up, he would match them up. He would use them as he interacted with other folks, and he made a series of these. I think there are some interesting parallels. All of this is to kind of say, what would Marcel have done given his sense of style, his sense of play, his sense of energy, and his kind of rascal nature? What would he have done with digital technologies at his hands? It's something that I think we need to think about as we approach different subjects, and especially art historical subjects, in our digital projects. So you can imagine by the end of this Duchamp semester and the end of this digital project, way back in the day, in 1997, I had a lot of broken objects in my apartment, a lot of dust gathering over things like that. I really got into it. And the next artist I really enjoyed studying was Robert Rauschenberg. He's one of those artists that took to Marcel Duchamp in a big way, and very much took permission from Marcel in using found objects and everyday objects, incorporating them into his work. He was born in Port Arthur, Texas, kind of a southern boy who took the New York world by storm. That appealed to me as well, coming from Mobile, Alabama, and at that point having a southern accent in New York City. This is a picture of Bob in front of one of his white paintings from 1952. Very early on in his career, he had gone through certain styles of painting and was finding himself simplifying more and more and getting to the core of what he was doing. And for him that meant painting surfaces with simply white. And so the idea here is kind of it was a dangerous thing for him to do. He felt like he was getting near the edge of something and perhaps evacuating all meaning from a painting, but found actually just the reverse. And this is something I've been thinking a lot about in terms of digital projects as well. As he approached that point where there was nothing on the painting except for white, he was finding that far from being empty of content, it was being filled with content all around him. The paintings, because they had no lines or shapes on them, really reflected what was going on in the room, shadows and lights. These pieces were hung above an amazing group of people in Black Mountain College for one of the first happenings. So instead of approaching the painting as being simplified and crunched down and smaller and almost wasting away, it got to that point, but then shifted to where it was a totally different sort of art piece, and one that incorporated the whole environment and the surrounding world. And that's an idea that he took to, he kind of bounced from that and took to its logical extreme as well. Here's another picture of Bob and his white paintings. And you can imagine these in a giant room with Merce Cunningham, John Cage doing music, a band of fantastic merrymakers doing what they did, and these performed as a kind of screen which gave them a certain permission and provided a sense of place for what they were doing, reflected in a real way the activity that was going on. I labeled this as my collection. This is Short Circuit of 1955. Bob was very generous in that when he was invited to the show at the Stable Gallery, he was disappointed that his friends couldn't go as well. So he included in his, I call it a collection piece, his friend Jasper Johns, whose flags on the left, and Sue Weil, whose painting is on the right. Gives you a sense of, here I'm thinking about, okay, how can we give people their own space and their own license within a collection space? This is one way to think about that idea, including others and expanding a creative space. When I talk about the white paintings as inclusive, including the world, becoming environmental pieces, this is another way to look at it. This is collection of just a few years later, where he bounced off of that white painting and went to a kind of painting that was an ultimate collage. You can imagine him dipping his fingers into a stream of images coming past. For this, there are some obvious and a little bit snarky comparisons to be made with a stream of Pinterest photos coming by you. These are images that are popping up in popular culture that we're awash in now and swimming in. I think it's fun to think about Pinterest, and it's very organized and a grid type of structure, as perhaps what would it look like if it were a little bit messier. This is another fun collection piece that Bob did. As he was traveling through Italy with a friend, I marked this mobile collection. He found that he couldn't, of course, take his studio pieces with him, so he took his camera and he started collecting little objects, very personal objects that were filled with a sense of time and past, a sense of story in each one. This is something that I think we can think about in terms of mobile collections. Is there a way that we can make a mobile collection such that it's personal, such that it shows the age and how many times something has been passed around? Some way of indicating how something might have been touched. At one point, Bob said that he wanted to become a photographer, and if he was going to become a photographer, then he was going to have to travel the entire United States and take photographs inch by inch. And unless he could do that, he would not become a photographer. He ended up not becoming a photographer. But I think it's instructive just in the idea and the ambition of going to, as you're going place by place by place, bringing with you a certain eye, a certain attention to detail, a certain awareness as you're going. I mark this as no filter because he brought with him certainly the documentary style of the Depression era photographers. His approach was straight on. The facades are flat. The photos are black and white with a long exposure usually. And he would certainly fit in a no filter movement. There were lots of artists who took from Bob and from Marcel as well ideas and expanded on them and went in totally new directions. The sense of place was one that I talked about in terms of the white paintings, and even in terms of Bob going off and photographing the United States. This is a piece called Lightning Field, and it's Walter de Maria of 1977. This is a field of stainless steel spikes in a very flat field. It calls attention to the sky, to the ground, to the limitless potential of the environment, but also to the potential of danger. Because this is a place where lightning storms are fairly frequent. You can see in the skies, even in this photograph, that perhaps there's a storm coming. It's this sense of being hyper-aware. If you have ever found yourself, like me, at a gas station, knowing that you had your phone perhaps in your pocket, and you were waiting for the tank to fill, and why not make this an art moment and find something to photograph and put on Instagram? This is the kind of awareness-filled moment that I'm getting at by saying hyper-aware. Because lightning might strike. This is Richard Serra, Tilted Arc of 1980. Again, the sense of place and sense of environment. When we talk about augmented reality, we usually think of holding our phone up and seeing crazy something superimposed somewhere. This is a very real augmented reality. The installation broke up people's habits of where they were walking, made them realize a change in their lives. The workers in the GSA building that you see back there were not happy at this piece because it forced them to take a little bit longer to get to work. But it also called attention to its environment and to its square in a very real way. And in a way that we can think of augmented reality has the potential of doing. I also use that as a way of thinking about Spiral Jetty, which is Richard Smithson, 1970. This intervention in the landscape, the spiral made in the Salt Lake. A simple thing and probably not as large as we typically think of it, but it calls attention and makes the place a special keynote type of place that that highlights the sky and the lake and the environment, pinpoints it in a way, certainly a man-made way, but in a way that puts a frame around the sky in a sense and marks it as special. We have a new view of this now, and I'm curious as to whether this makes it, in some sense, a new work of art. We can see this now from Google Earth in a fantastic new way. It changes every couple of years, but it's a view that we haven't seen very often, certainly from a satellite. We have a similar work of art at my institution, the North Carolina Museum of Art. It's a work of art by Barbara Kruger. It was largely unheralded. It was built in 1980 to 84. Passed by a lot of people's eyes until recently. As people look for us and come to events and look us up on their maps and their mobile devices, they see this thing. and I think it's quite wonderful. It's called Picture This. It incorporates many elements from North Carolina. It's we like to say it's one of the first satellite-based works of art. Another that I've been thinking about recently in terms of audio tours and how we can engage visitors. This is Janet Cardiff. Her tours are fictional narratives, really. Her speaking into your ear as you're walking a real space can be very personal, very evocative, and true art experiences using the same tools as a traditional museum audio tour would use. Along those lines, this is Halsey Bergen, who does very similar things, but incorporates visitors' voices as well. So you'll move through a space, and based on where you are and holding your mobile device, you'll hear a different soundscape, and you'll hear visitors' voices that were in that place before, talking to you from the past. It's a fantastic. If any of you guys have been to Museums on the Web last year, he did a commission piece which was quite wonderful. Really, we find this fascinating, at least at my institution, because it's an experience, and the Janet Cardiff is as well, where your head is up and you're looking around. We have a 164-acre art park that's very special to us. And the last thing I want to do as a technologist is have people looking at their device as they're walking through. This is a way where they can look up and hear other visitors, and the sounds can change based on the time of day, the season of the year, the place they are, certainly in the park, the weather. These are all things that this magical mobile device can feed into, unbeknownst to the visitor, and offer an experience. This is, we're going to go back to Rauschenberg for just a little bit. This is called Black Market, 1956, I think. This is, I labeled it comments because this is a truly interactive piece. Rauschenberg meant for visitors to come by, take an object out of the box at the bottom, replace it with an object of their own, ideally an object that was special to them in some way, and then they were meant to document the transaction in the 4 tablets on the painting. It's all at once. It's a registrar's dream and a registrar's nightmare, because they're documenting their own transaction of an artwork within an artwork, but also commenting on the transaction themselves. And so this is something that we think a lot of when we have visitors in the gallery. Do we want the kind of interaction where visitors are leaving a comment about a work of art and taking as well? This is, excuse me, a final example. I was given this just last week. This is Rirkit Tiravanet, who's a contemporary artist, does installation art that consists largely of gallery meals. He'll offer just fantastic cooked Thai food to gallery goers. And I think this is wonderful in so many ways. We at the North Carolina Museum of Art, we've been talking a lot about how to engage our social media communities on site, and have been doing a lot of shepherding and some just fantastic events, tweet ups and pin ups, etc. And I didn't know until recently that this was also an opportunity for an art event. Danger. I have a few case studies of ideas I would love to share, and perhaps pitfalls, perhaps not, of working with artists versus creating your own artworks on staff, basically, in order to frame a gallery discussion. First, some background. We just built a fantastic new building. It has its own constraints, though. I mark this as super white because it is. We have just a wonderful natural light flooding through these galleries, but we have no screens inside at all. The curators are excited about mobile devices because people can bring their own screens and we can interact with them that way. But there's a pretty firm decision that within the architecture and within the style, it's a very minimalist style. There won't be movies or interactives in the space. And we've made a decision and a commitment in a lot of ways to frame our collection by engaging artists. This is a real simple example. This is one of the modern galleries. It's actually before a lot of the labels went up. We commissioned Ellen Atsui to do a tapestry piece for this gallery. And he took colors and basically did riffs off the Sean Kelly and the Garrett Richter and the Kiefer on the side in order to bring these together in an interesting space. So we have a history of engaging artists to contextualize in an aesthetic and in a historical way our collections. Another example, which I don't have an image of, is a book. We commissioned several poets to give reflections on the permanent collection, which is a fantastic book of fiction, nonfiction, poetry, long-form essays, etc., of artists thinking about our collection in new ways. So I said potential pitfalls. One of the first projects I worked on when I got to the museum 3 years ago was a video project where the African curator came to me and said, first of all, well, it's an African gallery, we need a map. People need a map on the wall to provide context for an African gallery. And that was great. We were working on that, and then she said, and this is so true, well, in an African gallery, just a single map is not really going to work because the map has changed every year for the past 500 years. So we need something that lives and that's active to provide access and context for all of these images. So we talked about video and some other things, and we finally got to the point where we were talking about the video, and we were also talking about a freestanding plinth in the middle of the gallery with a frosted glass, projection from above, kind of elaborate. You can get a sense of it here, and I apologize for this. This was taken during the kind of the rough test of it, but a substantial piece of hardware. Finally, the question was, well, can we create a video presentation that evokes the changing identity of Africa throughout the years using these amazing maps? And at that point, we had a conversation, and it went along the lines of, where does this become a work of art in and of itself? At some point, we're making creative decisions that are the same sorts of decisions that Elle was making in the other gallery, and that we make even in the African gallery when we bring in loans of contemporary African artists to bridge certain collections to this and that and to provide context. Now, that's a complicated question because certainly in the African gallery, it's one where context certainly matters. It's not the same as the modern gallery. These are artifacts. We're already kind of pulling these out of their useful context. A mask was really never meant to be in a super white gallery. So it really does need some sort of context to restore what it was in some sense and to give visitors a sense of use. But this is, I kind of hold this up as a big question mark because it is, as really museum technologists, sometimes we're called, and we should be called to say, where does the technologist stand and the artist begin on this one? And should we bring somebody else in to help with it? Or should we commission an artist to do it? Or should we do this in-house? We talked about the Rauschenberg in terms of comments and people engaging it and writing their own comments on the piece. We did a piece called Speak Up for our 30 Americans exhibition of contemporary African American artists, and put a label, little label next to several of the pieces in the show. You can see it next to the Hank Willis Thomas branded head up there. Hacked a WordPress installation to enable visitor comments via the web, via mobile, via SMS and voice. Each of the labels had a very bare bones prompt to it, and I show you here the web interface for it. But even this, these are certainly artists, Hank foremost among them, who's totally aware of what Rauschenberg did, and the other artists who have engaged the audience in certain ways. And we have to think of Branded Head certainly as one example of Hank deciding not to do that. So we do need to be mindful, and I'm not saying that this was a bad decision, but we do need to be mindful of imposing a structure on a work of art that perhaps the artist didn't intend for, or may actually promote a misinterpretation of the piece. Branded Head is a piece that it's huge and it's striking and it stays with you for a while, but maybe doesn't lend itself to a quick comment on a mobile device in the gallery. And I've got to say the kind of returns on that project too were, some of them were interesting, but in terms of quantity, there wasn't a lot of them, and I wouldn't say the quality was super high either. Opportunity, but there are those, and it was great to go after Jackie in his talk. Because we have started to do a lot of these things. There are super opportunities. So I've been talking about these artists who provide us ways of thinking about the things we're doing creatively. How do we engage those in new ways? And what are the opportunities for us when we do that? One is to collaborate with the local artists. We've started to do that. There's a staff group that has formed meetups basically with local artists to engage them, to get them on campus, to get their ideas, and also to open the museum up for them. Museum alternative art spaces. There are things that we have that are ripe for works of art that we use either as promotional spaces or as empty spaces. It's interesting to think of a museum homepage as a canvas for a work of art. The only museum that I know of that does that is the Aspen Art Museum. But it's an interesting idea. MoMA gave away their visitor information screens, 9 screens, for an exhibition of artists. That's another idea, which I find compelling. Artful events and happenings, also to go along with the art networks. When we think about a tweet up as a happening or an art event or an artful gathering of interesting folks, things get really interesting. Artist process is certainly on staff and on our interactive team. We think about iteration and exploration in a creative way. Some of the things I touched on were humane design, the kind of the personal, the intimate. How can we make an online collection or a mobile collection one that is personal and personable in a way that is conducive on a mobile device? And it's fun to think about if we consider how much these artists, Marcel and Bob and the rest, have expanded the idea of art and the practice of art. It's fun to think of a staff as encouraged and enabled by those art practices. At least for me personally, I think it's fun to think of at least part of my day as an artful experience, and one that fits within the mission of what we're doing, which is to provide the people of North Carolina with the experience of art on an everyday basis. Thanks.
Thank you, Chad. A lot of this is it hits close to home. As you know, I know that as educators and museum employees in general, we have to stay out of the business of making art. You know, there's a line when we're creating digital technologies, digital interpretation. We know that we have to stay away from that kind of, as much as we may have ideas we think are great and we want to put into we want to try them out, there's definitely a line there. And so as long as we enlist outsiders, as long as we go to people who don't work for the museum, then it's like they can, you know, they can do whatever they want. It can be art, and it can blur the line, it can blur the boundary between interpretation and art. So that's a pretty interesting thing. And I think the African map is a great example of that. It's something where it's very easy to imagine it going either way. That can be an interpretation task. You could choose a digital artist whom you think would work sympathetically with that problem space, and give it to them, or hire them to do it. Then you have a whole different set of kind of administration problems around like if it's commissioned art. Go ahead.
I was actually going to touch on that because that question is something I'm really curious about. I'm Eric Siegel from the New York Times. We commissioned a lot of work from people, ITP graduates, I used to teach at ITP, and it's a little hard to tell if they're artists or designers, right? And so you ask them if you ask an artist to do an interpretive map of Africa, there's a different set of rules than if you ask a designer to do both how you iterate, how they take direction. And so I'm curious what your experience is sort of treading that digital blur, between designers and artists.
I think that's a really tricky one. Probably the example that's closest to home for me, since we didn't outsource that one, is we have a series of videos which I did contact local musicians to run soundtracks basically for. And it was very much, I'm not a curator, although that's kind of the department that I started in. It was a very different process than one I used with contractors. It was one that was much more me in a position of just granting freedom and having to
Live with the results.
live with the results.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's really a struggle for us. Anyway.
But it also, for us, it gives us, and this kind of goes back to the mission idea. Even though the results maybe aren't what I expected, it makes the piece, even from a marketing standpoint, a more creative and art-filled piece in a sense. One that connects to the local community in a way that a contractor, led piece wouldn't, and one that in the end may be more effective, even if it's one that I hadn't thought of.
Sure.
Related to that, to turn that question over to Jackie, I'm really interested in how if my institution can work with arts technologists, like people from Arts Tech, MakerBot people, and Maker Faire folks, and bring them into the museum to see what, to have that sort of cultural exchange between these two communities. I'm wondering if there's maybe other people are having similar questions who aren't as familiar with these groups. What's the sort of, you can talk a little bit maybe about what the cultural divide looks like from your perspective, what it feels like when an institution is approaching a group of arts technologists. Do you have any advice on that? Or as an institution, when we're approaching a group of arts tech people, to invite some sort of collaboration, are there blind spots that we're sort of prone to not to have because we're not understanding the culture that we're walking into?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting when there's one thing that I actually I deleted a whole section was like networks of makers, hackers, programmers, creative technologists. I mean, there's so much of an active network. I mean, the whole Maker Faire thing came out of all these little groups and larger groups, and I mean, I think the most successful example I've seen was at the New York the New York Maker Faire, where it's incredible to see that partnership. And I think the Maker Faire in New York is successful because there was such a close partnership, and it's like perfect overlap in terms of mission of what all the makers are doing. And the institution is doing. So I think that's like an ideal. I'm really interested. I mean, personally, I would love to see arts institutions that have space, that are looking to partner with these organizations, with these maker communities, to host meetups there, to facilitate that. I don't know whether, I mean, some organizations, it may make sense for the marketing person to be liaison between those groups, or it may be like an R&D new media section. I'm not sure where that lives, but I'd really be interested to see that happen more. I think it really is going to differ from each organization, but I think it's really important to have like a dedicated point person, so that there is some translation of like, these are the organization needs, and these are like the needs of that community. So there's like representatives talking to each other. I think that facilitates that process.
Anybody's curious what the Maker Faire is, so I can hang around afterwards and talk about how it works the whole time.
And
Yeah.
I'll be talking about that interaction between maker groups and museums at my innovation panel tomorrow, Friday.
Awesome.
Little pitch, shameless plug.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see that happen more and more, with like independent groups working more and more with organizations and institutions. I mean, I love to see that happen. I've seen it happen.
There's a lot of stress there though, because like organizations like that, where they'll release their software for free, and then you'll look at the license, and the license is like, you can use this for anything you want unless it's for marketing. If you're like, the license is, if you're a brand like Nike and you want to look like you're hip with the youth, you're not allowed to use this software. And like legal, you show that to legal, and they're like, we can't use it, or can we? We don't know. And like, you have to go to these authors who wrote this stuff 4 years ago and don't have the same email addresses, and like, maybe you're reaching out to them. So I don't think it's just as simple as. Sometimes it's not as easy to get in contact with the people that you're trying to.
Yeah.
Other questions?
Also, when we went to have a hackathon at the Met, we had to explain to a lot of people who had seen hackers what a hackathon wasn't what they thought it was. Sounds a little dangerous. Yeah, right?
Because of a lot of the groups that you're talking about, I know you talked about some online communities that are strictly online, but that Arts Tech is specifically a meetup.
Yeah.
And it's has an emphasis on the face-to-face. So I'm wondering anyone who wants to talk to this can, but I'm directing it at you. What do you think? How do organizations like that survive if they, like, how frequently do you have to actually see one another face to face for it to survive, and how do you keep it alive without, in other words, like, how many people need to be actively sort of stoking the, stoking the fire in order for it to keep going, and then, and what are the dangers of, like, what ultimately can kill it?
Yeah. 4. No, I don't know.
That's kind of hard.
I mean, I think one of the things that I think with Archtech specifically, when we started out our first year in New York, we were meeting, I don't know, maybe 6 times a year. 6 times, 8 times. Then now we're trying to have monthly meetups in New York. In San Francisco, we had a meetup in February. We were trying to organize it. I wasn't in the city. So, this year we're planning in San Francisco to have 6 to 8 meetups and then a few parties. So I think it's important to have that kind of regularity, whether you meet on the third Thursday of every month, or first Friday's been successful because it's nice alliteration, but it's when it's going to happen every month. So I think that is important for a group to survive in a way, and network to survive, is to have that kind of regularity for its members and just so people know, especially if it's in person. But at the same time, if a group dies, either the organizer gets burnt out, or the network is just not there anymore. Having it survive for the sake of survival doesn't make sense. And a lot of networks die away because the communities go away. So I think other things come in to fill its place. So at the same time, I think while it's important for an organization to survive, I think it's also important to let things die. But for Archtech, I think our goal is to have bi-monthly, at least for the first year, for local chapters, and to help promote that and support that in a way. So.
Yeah. And on that topic of longevity, allowing things to die, there's the question of that blurry area in between interpretation and art. That if you commission a piece, then if you commission somebody to do something within your museum, then there's a certain set of administrative rules that apply to it. If you create it yourself, you're allowed to pull the plug whenever you like. Now, whenever your institution can agree to pull the plug. Most of us don't ever build things with an expiration date on them, but we know that custom software has a shelf life. And so what do you think of digital art that is commissioned? How do you deal with a lifespan? At what point, are the projects you're talking about, do they have to be conserved? Mm-hmm. And is there an agreement with the artist that governs that?
That is probably the trickiest question with respect to digital art, and certainly weighs on the decision-making process in terms of, do we commission a work of digital art or do we not? We have not yet.
We typically don't own them. We typically license them.
Mm-hmm.
And so that gets around. It's not part of our collection. It's effectively a commission for a certain period of time. And there's a warranty within that period of time that they'll keep it alive. And after that period of time, disappears into the ether.
Makes sense. You?
Licensing something. I work in the field of public art, and so the museum realm, and public art is much more comfortable with the idea of commissioning temporary works of art, and it's just a standard way that we work. So whether it's digital or even a mural that's painted on a wall, there's some anticipation that that wall won't be available
I think putting those, that question of impermanence on an artwork really kind of opens an opportunity space in terms of social media. And even when, we have works at SFMoMA, for example, which are basically on view all the time, when they for some reason are not, then it's actually kind of a big deal. Like visitors have these existential crises if the Rothko isn't on view or if the Kahlo isn't on view. And but it actually gives us an opportunity to make an event out of out of something coming out of storage or off, back from a loan or something like that. There's actually a pretty interesting kind of dialogue there between the event-driven audience and the whatever we create around events versus the whatever we can make out of collections. Go ahead.
I'm kind of interested in crowd conservation. I don't know if that's something people have coined yet, but if you look at what Jason Scott's done with his archive team, or what Kenneth Goldsmith does with Hulu.com. Hulu.com will be an amazing archive, 20 years when nothing else is around anymore, due to degradation or whatever. He's got digital versions of that. And personally, I've conserved a Janet Cardiff sound walk at Central Park. I just walked over to the public art fund and borrowed the CD and ripped it, and now it's on my website. And they linked over, Janet Cardiff's assistant emailed me recently and was like, oh, we see that you have our artwork on your website. Can you please add this text of wear headphones of a certain type to have the best experience? I thought that was pretty cool. But I think more and more this stuff will happen outside of institutions as well as in institutions. I hope. I don't know.
Yeah. Now, was there a question in there or not?
No,
just
I was just randomly.
all right. Oh, cool. That's totally okay. I just needed to make sure.
Well,
I mean, maybe the question is housing institutions facilitate that more, or make sure that what the crowd is doing is actually useful to culture.
Right. Well, we're now at 3 o'clock, so I don't want to keep people longer than they want to stay. But do you want to just respond? With that in mind, would you like to respond?
I'll just
leave it. All right. Well, thanks everyone for coming. Thank you for your participation, and thanks to both of our speakers.
Thanks, Tim.
thanks.